Nobody whispered that sentence. My father said it straight to my face, right over the pot roast, like he was handing out a medal. He had transferred my entire wedding fund to my sister because she deserved a proper celebration. I did not cry. I just watched my fiancé stand up, place his phone on the table, and ask the question that made the room freeze. Do you folks want to know what I actually do for a living? My name is Josie Norris, and I have always felt less like a daughter and more like a tenant in my parents' affections, one who is constantly behind on rent. Driving into Cedar Ridge always felt like putting on a wool coat that had been left out in the rain heavy, damp, and smelling faintly of something rotting underneath the surface. The lawns in this satellite town were manicured to within an inch of their lives, green geometric squares that screamed order and control. My parents' house was no different. It was a 2-story colonial that looked perfect from the street, provided you did not look too closely at the foundation. I walked into the dining room with Raymond Hughes's hand warm against the small of my back. That warmth was the only real thing in the room. The air inside smelled of roasted garlic and floor wax. My mother, Marianne, was already seated, smoothing a napkin over her lap with the precise, nervous movements of a woman who knew a storm was coming but planned to pretend it was just a light drizzle. My sister, Mallory, sat across from her, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression that I knew she had practiced in the mirror. And then there was my father, Gordon Norris, sitting at the head of the table like a CEO presiding over a hostile takeover rather than a Sunday dinner. The envelope was already on the table. It sat right next to the gravy boat, thick and cream-colored. It looked like a summons. We had barely made it through the salad course when Gordon cleared his throat. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of a gavel coming down. He did not look at me. He looked at the envelope, then he pushed it across the mahogany surface toward Mallory. Not me. "Your mother and I have been looking at the finances," Gordon said. His voice was casual, the kind of tone one uses to discuss the weather or a change in cable providers. "We decided it makes more sense to consolidate the wedding funds. We have transferred the account designated for you, Josie, into Mallory's budget." The room went so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "Excuse me?" I asked. My voice did not shake. I had trained it not to shake since I was 12 years old. "It is just a matter of logistics." "Josie," my mother chimed in, her eyes fixed on the centerpiece of silk flowers. "Mallory's vision for her ceremony is expansive. It requires a certain level of execution. You and Raymond, well, you two are doing something simple, backyard style, right? You do not need the same resources." Gordon nodded, finally looking at me with a gaze that was entirely void of apology. "Mallory deserves a wedding that is done right, a real wedding. We want to make sure the family is represented properly. You understand?" He did not ask if I understood. He stated it. Mallory reached out and took the envelope. She did not open it. She just tapped her manicured fingernail against the paper. A rhythmic tick, tick, tick that sounded like a bomb timer. She smiled, a small, tight expression that showed just the edges of her teeth. It was a smile of victory. It was the smile of a girl who had never heard the word no without throwing a tantrum that shattered windows. "Thanks, Daddy," Mallory said. "Honestly, Josie, it is better this way. You would just waste it on something depressing. Whatever you two are planning, it is barely a reception. It is basically a potluck." I felt the familiar coldness spread through my chest. It was not shock. Shock implies surprise, and I was not surprised. This was the rhythm of the Norris house. I was the rough draft. Mallory was the final print. I was the placeholder. She was the event. I looked at the three of them, my father, self-righteous in his theft, my mother, complicit in her silence, and my sister, gloating over her spoils. I did not cry. I had learned a long time ago that tears in this house were not met with comfort. They were viewed as a weakness to be exploited. Blood in the water for the sharks. I picked up my fork and set it down again. "So that is it," I said. "You take the money Grandma intended for both of us, and you just give it to her." "It is our money, Josie," Gordon snapped. his mask of calm slipping just an inch. We manage it. We decide where it goes. And frankly, we are investing in the wedding that will actually reflect well on us. Beside me, Raymond had gone very still. Raymond was a man of stillness. In the 2 years we had been together, my family had mistaken his quiet nature for a lack of spine. They called him boring. They whispered that he was simple, because he drove a 3-year-old sedan and wore suits that did not have designer labels stitched on the cuffs. They saw a man who listened more than he spoke and assumed he had nothing to say. They were wrong. Raymond was watching my father. He was not blinking. His hands were resting on the table, relaxed, fingers laced together. He did not look angry. Anger is hot. Anger is messy. Raymond looked cold. He looked like a surgeon assessing a tumor that needed to be cut out. "You are stealing from her," Raymond said. His voice was low, level, and devoid of inflection. Mallory laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Oh, please, don't be dramatic. Ray, God, you are such a downer. This is why nobody talks to you at parties. You have this heavy energy. It is exhausting." "Mallory," my mother warned weakly, but she did not stop her. "No, let him speak," Gordon said, waving a hand dismissively. "He thinks he has a say in family finances. It is cute." Mallory leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You know, Raymond, you sit there with that superior look, but what do you actually bring to the table? Besides my sister's bad mood, you have absolutely nothing to prove. Do you... Because you have nothing. You act all mysterious. But we all know the truth. You are just some mid-level paper pusher who is terrified of speaking up. You do not even dare to tell us what your job title is because you know it is embarrassing compared to the people coming to my wedding." The insult hung in the air. Mallory had mistaken silence for cowardice. She thought she was kicking a stray dog. She did not realize she was poking a sleeping tiger through the bars of a cage that was not locked. Raymond slowly unlaced his fingers. He turned his head and looked at Mallory, then at Marianne, and finally, he locked eyes with Gordon. He stood up. The movement was fluid, controlled. He did not slam his chair back. He just rose, looming over the table. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He placed it face down on the tablecloth. "You folks keep asking about my work," Raymond said. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You seem very concerned with my lack of ambition, with my silence." "Sit down, Raymond," Gordon grunted, reaching for his wineglass. "You are making a scene. It is pathetic." "Mallory said I do not dare to say what I do," Raymond continued, ignoring my father completely. "She is partially right. I do not talk about it because usually, when I talk about my work, people stop eating. People start calling lawyers." He picked up the phone. He tapped the screen once, then twice. "Do you want me to clarify exactly what I do for a living?" Raymond asked. The question was short. It was simple, but the way he said it with a lethal, quiet precision made the room freeze. My mother stopped chewing. Mallory's smirk faltered, the edges of her mouth twitching downward. Gordon rolled his eyes, letting out a huff of arrogant amusement. "Oh, enlighten us. Raymond, are you a secret agent? A ninja? Go ahead. Show us your little secret so we can get back to celebrating Mallory." Gordon was smiling. He thought it was a bluff. He thought Raymond was going to show a picture of an employee of the month certificate from a cubicle farm. Raymond turned the phone around and slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped inches from my father's plate. Gordon looked down. I watched my father's face. I watched the arrogance drain out of him like water from a cracked basin. The flush of wine on his cheeks turned into a sickly, gray pallor. His eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. His hand, which had been reaching for his glass, froze in midair, then slowly retracted, trembling just enough to be noticeable. On the screen, there was no picture. There was a document. I could not read the text from where I sat, but I saw the header. It was a digital file, dense with numbers and timestamps, and at the top, There was a logo, not of a company, but of a regulatory agency. Gordon looked up at Raymond. The contempt was gone. In its place was raw, naked fear. "Where did you get this?" Gordon whispered. His voice was a dry husk. "Does it matter?" Raymond asked softly. "The question is not where I got it. Gordon, the question is why your name is attached to those 3 transactions on November 14th, and why the routing number leads to a shell company that does not technically exist." Mallory looked between them, confused, sensing the power shift, but not understanding the language. "Daddy, what is it? What is he showing you?" "Shut up, Mallory," Gordon hissed, without looking at her. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Raymond. He was still standing, his posture relaxed, his face impassive. He was not bluffing. He was not playing. For 2 years, he had sat at this table, listening to their insults, eating their dry turkey, and nodding politely at their condescension, and the whole time, he had been watching. He had been seeing things they thought were invisible. I realized then that this dinner was not about the $25,000 in the wedding fund. It was not about the envelope. It was about the architecture of my family. They had built a structure where I was the load-bearing wall they could drill into whenever they needed to hang a picture of Mallory. They believed I would stay standing because I always had. They believed I was simply a secondary character in their drama, a prop to be moved around. But they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten that even a prop can have a weapon, and they had certainly forgotten that the quiet man standing next to the prop might just be the one person in the world who knew how to burn the whole theater down. Raymond reached over and took his phone back. He slipped it into his pocket. "We are leaving," Raymond said. He held out a hand to me. I looked at the envelope on the table. I looked at my sister, who suddenly looked very small despite her big victory. I looked at my mother, who was staring at her plate as if hoping the pattern on the china would swallow her whole. And I looked at my father, who was breathing hard, sweating in the air-conditioned room. I stood up and took Raymond's hand. "Keep the money," I said. "You are going to need it more than I do." As we walked out of the dining room, the silence we left behind was heavy enough to crush bones. We walked out the front door, past the manicured lawn, and into the cool night air. I did not look back. I knew that the house behind me was no longer a home. It was a crime scene, and the investigation had just begun. The silence in Raymond's car was different from the silence in the house I grew up in. The silence in the car was empty, a clean space where I could breathe. The silence in my childhood home had always been heavy, filled with things that were being actively ignored. As we drove away from Cedar Ridge, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of orange against the dark glass, I felt the familiar ache of an old scar stretching. It was a specific kind of pain, the dull throb of realizing that you were never actually part of the portrait, just the person holding the frame. I grew up in a house where achievement was not just encouraged. It was the oxygen my parents breathed. But the ventilation system was rigged. It only pumped that air into one room. If you walked down the hallway of the Norris household, you would see what looked like a museum dedicated to a local deity. That deity was my sister, Mallory. The walls were a shrine to her existence. There was Mallory at 3 years old, winning the toddler beauty pageant. There was Mallory at 10, holding the regional gymnastics trophy. There was Mallory at 16, wearing the sash of the homecoming court, her smile bright enough to bleach the color out of everything around her. I lived there too. I knew I did because I had memories of the carpet under my feet and the smell of lemon polish on the banister. But if a stranger had walked in, they would have assumed Gordon and Marianne Norris had only one daughter. My presence was ghost-like. I was the blur in the background of the birthday photos, the shoulder visible at the edge of the frame. I was the child who learned early on that my accomplishments were written in invisible ink. I remember when I was 14 years old, I had won a significant writing competition for the state. It was a short story about a girl who learns to fly by jumping off a swing set. I was proud. It was a quiet, burning pride that I carried home in my chest like a small bird. I walked into the kitchen. The certificate crinkled in my sweaty hand. Ready to show them. My mother was standing by the island, holding a dress up to the light. It was emerald green satin. Mallory was standing on a stool, turning slowly. Look at the way it catches the light. Gordon, my mother said. She is going to be the absolute center of attention at the spring formal. I won, I said. My voice was small, swallowed by the size of the room. My father looked over his newspaper. What was that? Josie? I won the state writing contest, I repeated, stepping forward. I placed the certificate on the granite counter, careful not to touch the silk of the dress. My mother glanced at it. Her eyes flickered over the gold seal for less than a second before snapping back to Mallory's waistline. That is nice, honey. Really good. Gordon, do you think this hem is too long if she trips? It will ruin the entrance. It is fine, my father said, not looking at my certificate. Just make sure she has the right shoes. We do not want her looking short next to the Henderson boy. That is nice. But Mallory, that was the refrain of my life. It was the chorus of every song sung in that house. You got an A in calculus. That is nice. But Mallory needs a ride to cheer practice. You made the varsity soccer team. That is nice. But we have to pay for Mallory's modeling portfolio this month. My parents defined value through a very specific lens. To Gordon and Marianne Norris, a human being was a collection of metrics that could be announced at a cocktail party. Value was a job title that people recognized instantly. Value was a salary with 6 figures. Value was who you knew, what table you sat at during charity galas, and how much envy you could generate in your neighbors. I did not fit that metric. I liked to draw. I liked to write. I liked to sit in corners and watch how people moved. I did not want to be on the stage. I wanted to build the set. And to my parents, that made me defective. It made me the spare part that you kept in the drawer just in case the main machine broke down. But you never actually expected to use it. When I turned 18, I did not wait for them to kick me out. I packed my life into 3 cardboard boxes and a duffel bag. I moved to the city, 40 miles away, which might as well have been another planet. I did not ask for rent money. I did not ask for tuition. I clawed my way into a junior position at Maroline Creative Bureau, a mid-sized design firm that smelled of coffee beans and printer toner. At Maroline, nobody cared that I was not Mallory. They cared that I could turn a vague concept into a compelling visual campaign in 4 hours. I worked late nights, eating cold takeout at my desk, teaching myself the intricacies of typography and user experience. I built a life that was small, but it was mine. It was a studio apartment with a radiator that clanked and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. But I paid for every square inch of it. I learned how to live without waiting to be chosen. I learned that if you stop hoping for applause, you can actually get a lot of work done. The only person who ever saw me who really saw me was my grandmother, Evelyn Hart. Grandma Evelyn was my mother's mother, but she seemed to have come from a completely different genetic line. She was a woman made of iron and potting soil. She lived in a small cottage with a garden that was always slightly overgrown, full of wild roses and tomatoes that burst with flavor. She did not care about country clubs. She did not care about hem lengths. I would drive to her house on Sundays, bypassing my parents' place. We would sit on her back porch, drinking iced tea that was too sour, and she would look at me with eyes that were sharp and clear. "You are doing it again," she told me once, when I was complaining about a promotion I had missed because I did not schmooze the boss. "Doing what?" "Making yourself small so you do not bump into the furniture," Evelyn said. She put her glass down with a definitive clink. "Josie, your parents run a circus. They need clowns, and they need acrobats. You are neither. You are the one who realizes the tent is on fire. Do not expect them to thank you for that." She was the one who taught me the most important lesson of my life. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was crying because my father had forgotten my birthday for the 3rd year in a row. Evelyn wiped my face with a rough handkerchief that smelled of lavender. "Listen to me," she said. "The loudest house is sometimes the place with the least amount of truth. Your father talks big. Your mother nods big. Mallory laughs big. But it is all noise. Josie, it is all noise to cover up the fact that there is nothing solid holding the roof up. You are quiet, but you are real. Never trade your reality for their noise. It was Evelyn who first approved of Raymond. I met Raymond Hughes in the most unglamorous way possible. It was at a hardware store on a Saturday morning. I was trying to buy a wrench to fix a leaking pipe under my sink, and I was staring at a wall of tools with absolutely no idea what I was looking at. He did not swoop in and mansplain the difference between a socket wrench and a crescent wrench. He just stood next to me, looking at the same wall. "If it is a standard sink trap," he said, his voice calm, "you probably just need a pair of channel locks. The red handle ones are decent." I looked at him. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans that had paint stains on the knee. He had a face that wasn't handsome in the magazine way, but it was kind. It was a face that promised he would show up when he said he would. "Thanks," I said. "I am trying to avoid flooding my downstairs neighbor." "That is a noble goal," he said. A small smile touched the corners of his eyes. "I am Raymond. Josie." We went for coffee after that, then dinner, then everything else. Raymond was an act of stability in a world that I had always found chaotic. He did not brag. He never talked about how much money he made or who he knew. When we went out, he treated the waiter with the same respect he treated his boss. He was solid. He was the ground under my feet. But when I brought him home to meet my parents, they looked at him and saw a blank space. It was a disaster of a dinner. Gordon grilled him for an hour. "So, Raymond," my father had said, swirling his expensive red wine, "what is the 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself climbing to?" Raymond had cut his steak meticulously. "I plan to be doing good work, sir. And I plan to be happy with Josie." My father had actually laughed. It was a condescending chortle. "Happy, that is quaint. But ambition, Raymond, ambition is what drives the economy. You have to want to conquer something. You cannot just exist. I find that existence is complicated enough without trying to conquer people," Raymond had replied. My mother had exchanged a look with Mallory. It was the look that said, "He is a loser." From that moment on, the narrative was set to the Norris family. Raymond Hughes was unambitious. He was bland. He was a man who drove a sedan and wore off-the-rack suits, which meant he clearly had no drive. They mocked him behind his back. Mallory called him beige. They treated him like a piece of furniture that I had dragged in. Something that clashed with their decor, but that they would tolerate until I came to my senses. They never asked him about the details of his work. They heard financial sector and audit and tuned out. Assuming he was some low-level clerk stamping forms in a basement, they saw his silence as emptiness. They did not understand that some men are quiet because they have nothing to say, and others are quiet because they are carefully recording every word being spoken in the room. Driving away from the house that night, with the memory of my father's terrified face fresh in my mind, I looked over at Raymond. He was driving with both hands on the wheel, his eyes scanning the road. "You okay?" he asked. He did not look at me, but I heard the concern in the gravel of his voice. "I am fine," I said. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. I thought about the envelope on the dining room table. I thought about the $25,000 that was supposed to be for our wedding. Now earmarked for Mallory's influencers and champagne towers. It stung. Of course it stung. It was not the money. It was the message. The message was that Mallory's happiness was an investment, and my happiness was a cost they wanted to cut. But then I thought about what Raymond had shown them on his phone. I thought about the routing number. I thought about the fear in my father's eyes. "Ray," I said, "that document, the one you showed him." "Yeah." "Was that just to scare him, or is it real?" Raymond signaled a left turn. The blinker made a steady, rhythmic clicking sound. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded like a countdown. "Josie," he said, and his voice was as cold and hard as the asphalt beneath us. "I do not carry fake documents, And I do not make threats. I just state facts. He reached over and took my hand, squeezing it tight. Your grandmother, he said. We need to go see her. Tomorrow. Why? I asked. Because, Raymond said, what I showed your father was not just about him stealing your wedding fund. That money came from somewhere. Josie. And based on what I saw in those transfers, it did not come from his salary. It came from an account that shouldn't have been touched. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the car's air conditioning. Evelyn, he confirmed. They are not just cutting you out, Josie, they are carving her up. I looked out the window at the passing darkness. I had spent my whole life thinking my parents simply didn't love me enough. Now, staring into the night, I began to realize the truth was much uglier. It wasn't just a lack of love, it was a presence of greed. They had created a system where there were winners and spares, and they had decided that the spares were fuel to be burned to keep the winners warm. But they had made a mistake. They had forgotten that I was the one who built things. I was the one who paid attention to the details. And they had certainly forgotten that I was the granddaughter of Evelyn Hart, a woman who taught me that the truth is the only thing that matters when the house starts to shake. Okay, I said to Raymond. We go to Grandma's tomorrow. And Ray? Yeah. Thank you. He glanced at me then, just for a second. You do not have to thank me, Josie. I told you. I am here. I am not going anywhere. We drove on into the night, leaving the loud house behind us, heading toward a war that I finally realized I had been training for my entire life. I was done being the ghost. It was time to become the haunting, to understand why the dinner ended with a shattered family and a phone on the table. You have to understand the 6 months that led up to it. You have to understand that in the Norris family, generosity was never a gift. It was a purchase order. It was a down payment on your obedience. When Raymond asked me to marry him, he did not do it with a flash mob or a drone show. We were in our small apartment, eating takeout noodles on the floor because we had not bought a dining table yet. He handed me a ring that belonged to his great aunt. It was simple. Gold with a small diamond that had a slight chip in the corner. A flaw that made me love it more because it felt lived in. I said yes because I wanted a marriage, not a wedding. I wanted the tax returns and the shared flu seasons and the quiet Sunday mornings. I wanted a life that was sturdy. My parents, however, wanted a production. When we announced the engagement, my mother did not ask if I was happy. She asked to see the ring, frowned at the chip, and then immediately brought up the Norris Wedding Fund. We have set aside $25,000 for each of you girls, Gordon had said, sitting in his leather recliner like a king dispensing fiefdoms. It is family tradition. We want you to have a start. We are keeping it small, I had told them. Backyard ceremony, maybe 50 people. A food truck. We do not need $25,000. Nonsense, Marianne had snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You cannot have a food truck, Josie. It looks cheap. It reflects poorly on us. People will think your father's business is failing. Take the money. Have a proper wedding. That phrase became the soundtrack of my engagement, a proper wedding. My mother used it like a bludgeon. Every time I mentioned wildflowers, she mentioned imported orchids. Every time I mentioned a playlist, she mentioned a string quartet. To Marianne Norris, a wedding was not a union of two souls. It was a public relations campaign intended to secure our standing in the Cedar Ridge social hierarchy. And then, there was Mallory. Mallory got engaged 3 weeks after I did. It was not a coincidence. Mallory treated attention like a finite resource, if I was getting 10% of it. That was 10% she was losing. Her fiancé was a man named Chad, a corporate lawyer who wore loafers without socks and laughed too loud at my father's jokes. Mallory's wedding plans were not plans. They were a military operation. She talked about brand integration and aesthetic cohesion. She was courting sponsors. She wanted a venue that cost $6,000 just to unlock the front door. It has to be an event, Mallory told me one afternoon while we were looking at color swatches in my parents' living room. I mean, yours is cute. Josie, very rustic, but I need something that matches the Norris legacy. I need impact. It is a wedding, Mal, I said, flipping through a book of heavy cardstock. Not a product launch. Everything is a product launch, she replied, without looking up from her phone. That is what you never understood, while Mallory was busy trying to turn her nuptials into a viral moment. My father was busy trying to dissect Raymond. It happened at every Sunday dinner leading up to the explosion. Gordon could not categorize Raymond, and it drove him insane, in Gordon's world. Men were ranked by their utility and their net worth. He knew Chad's billing rate. He knew the partners at Chad's firm, but Raymond was a black box. So, Raymond, Gordon would say, stabbing a piece of roast beef. I was reading about the market fluctuations in the tech sector. How is your firm handling the volatility? We are steady, Raymond would answer. He never gave more than he had to. Steady, Gordon would repeat, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. Steady is code for stagnant. You know, in this economy, if you are not growing, you are dying. What is your title again? Analyst consultant. I work in risk assessment, Raymond said. It was technically true, in the same way that a tiger is technically a cat. Risk assessment, Gordon scoffed. Sounds like paperwork. You know, I could probably make a few calls. Get you an interview at a real firm, somewhere with a bonus structure. You are going to need it if you plan to support my daughter. I am comfortable with my current position, Raymond said. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend himself. He just sat there, solid and immovable. My parents took this refusal as arrogance mixed with incompetence. They decided that Raymond was secretive because he was ashamed. They whispered in the kitchen that he probably made $30,000 a year and was embarrassed to admit it. They treated him with a pitying condescension that made my blood boil. But the real turning point, the moment the fuse was actually lit, happened 2 months before the final dinner. I was at my parents' house to pick up some old boxes from the attic. My mother was out at a salon appointment, and my father was at the club. The house was empty. I walked into the study to leave a note, and I saw a stack of mail on the desk. It was mostly junk, but one envelope caught my eye because it had my name on it, or rather, it had the subject line written in the transparent window, Re-wedding disbursement /J. Norris. I assumed it was a check. I assumed my father had finally decided to release the funds he had been dangling over my head like a carrot. I opened it. It was not a check. It was a transaction confirmation from a wealth management firm, but it was not from my father's main business account. It was not from their joint personal savings. The source account was labeled the Evelyn Hart Revocable Trust, Management B. I stared at the paper. Evelyn Hart, my grandmother. I knew my grandmother had money. Her husband, my grandfather, had been a careful man who invested in land and boring municipal bonds back when they were cheap, but I had always been told that Grandma's finances were locked up, managed by a professional trustee, and used strictly for her care. Why was my wedding money coming from her account? And more importantly, why was the transaction listed as a distribution for medical necessity? I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I looked closer at the document. The amount was $25,000. The date was 3 days prior. But the categorization was wrong. You do not code a wedding gift as a medical necessity unless you are trying to hide where the money is going or why it is being taken out. I took a picture of the document with my phone. Then I put the paper back exactly where I found it, that Sunday. I went to see Grandma Evelyn. She was in her garden, deadheading the roses. She looked smaller than she used to, her spine curving slightly like a wilting stem, but her hands were still strong in her gardening gloves. "Grandma," I said, sitting on the stone bench beside her, "did you promise Mom and Dad money for my wedding?" Evelyn stopped snipping. She looked at me, her eyes clouded with cataracts but still sharp with intelligence. "I promised your mother I would help with the house upkeep," she said slowly. "And I told Gordon he could manage the day-to-day expenses because my eyes get so tired looking at the screens. But a wedding, I thought your father was paying for that. He certainly talks enough about how well his business is doing." He said there is a family fund, I said. He said you set it up. Evelyn laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. I set up a trust to keep me out of a nursing home. Josie, that is what I set up. If there is a wedding fund. I do not recall signing the check. She took off her gloves and patted my hand. Her skin felt like parchment paper. Money has a path. Josie, she said, it leaves footprints. Your grandfather always said that. If you want to know what a man is really doing, do not listen to his mouth. Watch where his money walks. If it walks in the dark, it is usually going somewhere it shouldn't. That night, I showed the photo of the document to Raymond. We were sitting on our second-hand sofa. The television was on, muted, casting flickering blue light over the room. Raymond looked at the photo for a long time. He zoomed in. He scrolled. He did not say anything for 5 minutes. This is a managed trust account, he said finally. Standard structure for elder care, strict withdrawal limits. Usually, you need a documented reason to pull principal out. It says medical necessity, I pointed out. Exactly, Raymond said. Wedding flowers are not medical necessities, which means my father lied to the bank, I finished. He told them he needed money for Grandma's health, and he was going to give it to me for the wedding. Or, Raymond said, his voice dropping an octave, he has been doing this for a while, Josie. $25,000 is a specific number. It is just under the threshold that triggers an automatic federal gift tax audit if structured incorrectly, but high enough to be significant. If he is pulling this out as medical, he is committing fraud against the trust. He is stealing from her, I whispered. He is not giving me a gift. He is fencing stolen goods. It is worse than that, Raymond said. He looked up at me, and his face was grim. If he has to steal $25,000 from an 80-year-old woman's medical fund to pay for a wedding, then he does not have the money he says he has. A man worth what your father claims to be worth writes a check from his checking account. He does not raid the trust. That was the moment the world shifted. I suddenly realized that the Norris Wedding Fund was not a symbol of control. It was a symptom of desperation. My father was not just a bully. He was a bully who was running out of ammunition. What do we do? I asked. We wait, Raymond said. We do not take the money, but we let them think we are playing along. I need to see more. 1 document is a mistake, 2 is a pattern, 3 is a case. They are going to give it to Mallory, I said, a sudden realization hitting me. If I push back, or if they decide my wedding isn't proper enough, they will just shift the allocation. They will give her the money. Let them, Raymond said. Let them move the money, because every time they move it, they leave a track, and I'm very good at following tracks. So we went to the dinners. We endured the insults. I sat there while my mother criticized my dress choice, calling it pedestrian. I sat there while Mallory bragged about her ice sculpture guy. I watched my father drink too much wine and boast about his business acumen, knowing that he was likely paying for that wine with money meant for his mother-in-law's hip surgery. The tension built in my chest like pressure behind a dam. I watched them preening and posing, acting like royalty, while the foundation of their castle was made of theft and lies. And then came the night of the dinner, the night my father decided to punish me by taking away the fund. He thought he was taking away a prize. He thought he was asserting his dominance. He had no idea that he was handing Raymond the final piece of evidence he needed. He had no idea that by transferring the wedding fund to Mallory, he was not just being cruel. He was creating a paper trail that linked his favorite daughter directly to the crime. I walked into that dining room knowing the truth. But I did not know Raymond was going to pull the trigger that night. I thought we were just gathering intelligence. But when my father pushed that envelope across the table, that thick, cream-colored envelope that represented my grandmother's safety and my family's betrayal, I saw Raymond's eyes change. The stillness in him turned sharp. The observation phase was over. The proper wedding was about to become a funeral for their reputation. The week after the dinner, the silence from my parents was absolute. It was a tactical silence, the kind designed to make me sweat, to make me doubt my own sanity, and to eventually bring me crawling back to apologize for ruining their evening. But I was not crawling. I was digging. I went to see Grandma Evelyn on a Tuesday morning. The air in her house was usually stale, smelling of dried lavender and old books. A scent I had always associated with safety, but that day, it smelled like dust and neglect. Evelyn was sitting at her kitchen table, a magnifying glass in one hand and a stack of envelopes in the other. She looked frustrated, her brow furrowed in a way that made the lines on her face look deeper, like cracks in dry earth. "Josie," she said, looking up as I let myself in. "Thank goodness. My eyes they are not cooperating today. Everything is a blur." "Let me help," I said, putting my bag down. "What are we looking at?" "Bank statements," she sighed, pushing the stack toward me. "Gordon usually handles this, but I got a notification on my phone about a service fee, and I wanted to check it. I cannot make heads or tails of these columns." I sat down and pulled the papers closer. They were standard monthly statements from the local credit union, printed on thin, cheap paper. At first glance, everything looked normal. There was the deposit from her pension. There was the automatic payment for the electric bill. There was the subscription for her gardening magazine. But then I started to look at the debit column. It was not one large sum. If it had been a single withdrawal of $10,000, it would have been a red flag waving in a hurricane. This was different. This was a slow, steady drip. "Grandma," I said, running my finger down the list. "What is this withdrawal for $350 on the 4th? She squinted. "The 4th, I think, that was when the man came to fix the gutter." "Okay. And this one, $400 on the 12th. It is labeled utility support." "I am not sure," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Maybe the water bill was high. Gordon said the rates went up." I kept reading. The pattern was terrifying in its consistency. Every week. Sometimes twice a week. There were withdrawals. They were never large enough to trigger a fraud alert. They were always odd. Specific numbers. $280, $415, $600. The descriptions were masterpieces of vague legitimacy. Home maintenance, transportation assistance, medical copay, administrative fee. I took out my phone and opened the calculator app. I started adding up the small withdrawals from just the last 3 months. My thumb hit the plus sign over and over again. When I hit equals, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Grandma," I said, keeping my voice steady. "In the last 90 days, there have been withdrawals totaling $8,400 for miscellaneous services. Did you have $8,000 of work done on the house?" Evelyn stared at me. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked around her small, tidy kitchen. The wallpaper was peeling in the corner. The linoleum was cracked by the fridge. "No," she whispered. "The only person who has been here is the neighbor boy who rakes the leaves. I pay him $20 cash." "Gordon handles this account?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He helps me," she said, defaulting to the script she had probably repeated to herself 1,000 times. "After your grandfather passed, Gordon said it was too much for me. He said the laws were changing. He said he would set up a system to make sure I never missed a bill. He has access to pay things for me." "He is paying things. All right," I muttered. I remembered a conversation with Mallory from a few months ago. We had been at a brunch place where the mimosas cost $18. Mallory had been talking about her portfolio, or rather, the portfolio she pretended to manage. "You have to optimize assets, Josie," she had said, waving a manicured hand. "Dad says the worst thing you can do is let capital sit stagnant, especially with Grandma. I mean, she is sitting on that house and those accounts, and she barely spends a dime. It is basically dead weight. We need to make sure the legacy is liquid before it gets eaten up by taxes or some nursing home scam." At the time, I thought she was just being her usual shallow self. Now, looking at the numbers on the page, I realized optimizing assets was code for siphoning them off before the owner was even dead. I took photos of every page. "I am going to take these copies. Grandma, I want Raymond to look at them. He understands these codes better than I do. Josie, Evelyn said, gripping my wrist. Her hand was shaking. Do not cause trouble. Your father, he has a temper when he is questioned. He says I get confused. He says I forget expenses. You are not confused, Grandma, I said, squeezing her hand. And I am not causing trouble. I am fixing it. I drove home and immediately called my parents. I put the phone on speaker so Raymond, who was sitting at our small kitchen table with his laptop open, could hear. Hello, my mother answered. She sounded breathless, like she was in the middle of something important. Mom, it is Josie. I am at Grandma's. I am looking at her bank statements. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. Then, my father's voice came on the line. He must have been in the room. Why are you snooping through Evelyn's private papers? Josie? Gordon asked. His voice was low, dangerous. She asked me to read them to her, I said. Dad, there are withdrawals here every week. Hundreds of dollars, labeled as maintenance and utilities. The total is over $8,000 in 3 months. What is going on? We manage her expenses, Josie, Gordon snapped. You have no idea what it costs to maintain a property like that. There are taxes, insurance, retainer fees for contractors. You think that house runs on magic? The house is falling apart. Dad, I shot back. The wallpaper is peeling. The gutters are rusted. Where is the money going, and why is it labeled utility support when she pays her own electric bill from her checking account? Are you accusing me of something? Gordon's voice rose to a shout. After everything I do for this family, I spend hours every week managing her affairs so she does not have to worry. And this is the thanks I get my own daughter, interrogating me like I am a criminal. I am asking for receipts. Dad, if it is for maintenance, show me the invoices. I do not answer to you, he yelled. You are ungrateful, Josie. You and that boyfriend of yours. You are trying to stir up drama because you are jealous of Mallory. Stay out of things you do not understand. The line went dead. I looked at Raymond. He had not moved during the entire call. He was staring at the photos I had sent him of the bank statements. His face was a mask of concentration. He is gaslighting you, Raymond said calmly. Standard deflection. Attack the accuser so you do not have to answer the question. Is it theft? I asked. Legally. Raymond turned his laptop around. He had created a spreadsheet in the last 10 minutes, inputting the data from the photos. Look at the dates, Raymond said, pointing to the screen. November 4th, November 11th, November 18th, every Friday. He withdraws $450. Then, look here, on the 15th of every month, a transfer of $900 to an external account labeled Services. So, Raymond said, leaning back. It is structured. It is automated. This is not paying a contractor. This is a salary. He is paying himself a salary from her savings. And these smaller withdrawals, cash. He is taking cash out at the ATM near his office. I checked the branch code. He looked at me, and his eyes were sad. Josie, do you believe this is accidental? Do you believe your father accidentally scheduled a weekly cash withdrawal that coincides with his Friday golf game? I felt sick. No, neither do I. We went back to Evelyn's house the next day. The mood in the house had shifted. It felt fragile, as if the walls were made of eggshells. Evelyn was sitting in her armchair by the window, looking out at the overgrown garden. She was not reading. She was not knitting. She was just staring. Grandma? I asked softly. She turned to look at me. Her eyes looked older than they had the day before. I have been thinking, Josie. I have been sitting here thinking about my life, about your grandfather. He worked so hard. He worked 6 days a week at the plant, so we would be safe. I know, I said, sitting on the ottoman at her feet. Gordon told me I was broke, she said. Her voice was thin. Last month, I wanted to buy a new winter coat, a good wool one, and he told me I didn't have the funds available. He said we were tight this quarter. She looked down at her hands. But there is money. Isn't there? Yes, I said. There is money. He is just spending it. She closed her eyes. A single tear leaked out and tracked through the wrinkles on her cheek. It was a quiet devastation. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to protect her were the ones holding the knife. I found something else, I said. I had to tell her. I couldn't protect her with lies anymore. I was looking for the deed to the house in the desk, just to make sure it was safe. I found a document in the bottom drawer. I pulled a piece of paper out of my bag. It was a copy. This is a durable power of attorney, I said. It gives Gordon full control over your finances, your real estate, and your medical decisions. It grants him the right to gift himself money from your accounts without limit. Evelyn frowned. I signed a power of attorney years ago, just for emergencies. This one is dated October 12th of last year, I said. The notary stamp is from a friend of Gordon's, and the signature. I held it up. The signature at the bottom read Evelyn Marie Hart, but the loop on the Y was wrong. The slant was too sharp. I was in the hospital on October 12th, Evelyn said. Her voice was hard now. I had that dizzy spell. I was in the emergency room all day. I know, I said. I checked the calendar. I did not sign this, she said. She looked at the paper, and for the first time, I saw the grandmother I remembered, the woman of iron and potting soil, the woman who did not tolerate weeds in her garden. He forged it, she stated. It wasn't a question. Yes. And the notary probably didn't even see you, just stamped it as a favor to Dad. Evelyn stood up. She walked over to the window and placed her hand on the glass. They think I am a senile old woman, she said. They think I am a resource, a coal mine they can strip until it is empty. We are going to stop them, I said. Raymond knows a lawyer, a specialist in elder law. Her name is Dana, but we need you to be ready. It is going to be ugly. They will say you are confused. They will say you gave them permission. Evelyn turned around. Her face was set in stone. Let them say it, she said. I may be old. Josie, my eyes may be tired, but I am not dead yet, and I will be damned if I let Gordon Norris spend your grandfather's sweat on his country club fees. I realized then that the stakes had changed. This was no longer about my wedding. It wasn't about the $25,000. It was about survival. I wasn't fighting for a ceremony anymore. I was fighting for Evelyn's life. I was fighting to prove that she was still a person, not just a line item on my father's fraudulent ledger. Okay, I said. We build the case. We get the records. Get everything, Evelyn said. If he wants to claim he managed my money, let's see exactly how he managed it. As I packed up the papers, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. It was heavy, but it was solid. It was the weight of responsibility. For years, I had felt like the extra child, the one who didn't matter. But now, I realized that being the invisible one had given me a superpower. I had learned to watch. I had learned to listen. And now, I was going to use everything I had seen to tear their little kingdom down. Brick by stolen brick, the wedding was forgotten. The war had begun. The invitation for the trip arrived like a peace treaty wrapped in barbed wire. It was an email from my father. Subject line in all caps, family retreat. The text body was full of buzzwords about reconnecting and healing, the kind of corporate language Gordon Norris used when he was trying to sell a bad deal to a skeptical client. He claimed it was a celebration for Grandma Evelyn, a chance to get her out of the house and into the sun before winter truly set in. I was suspicious. Raymond was skeptical, but Evelyn was hopeful. That was the part that twisted a knife in my gut. Despite everything, despite the missing money, the forged signatures, the gaslighting, my grandmother still wanted to believe that her son loved her. She wanted to believe that the theft was just a misunderstanding, a clerical error that could be fixed with a few cocktails by a pool. When I told her about the trip, her face softened. She went to the closet and pulled out a suitcase that smelled of cedar and old perfume, a hard-shell Samsonite that hadn't seen an airport carousel in 15 years. I need to buy a new hat, she had said, touching the brim of an old straw fedora. And maybe some comfortable sandals. I do not want to slow you all down. For 3 days. She prepared. She was terrified of being the burden. She packed her medications in labeled Ziploc bags. She printed out the itinerary my father had sent. She arrived at my apartment 2 hours early for the drive to Lakehurst International, sitting on her suitcase in the hallway, her hands clasped tight over her purse. She looked like a child waiting to be picked up from school, desperate not to be forgotten. The drive to the airport was tense. Raymond drove, his eyes scanning the traffic with the vigilance of a bodyguard. Evelyn sat in the back, checking her purse every 10 minutes to make sure her ID was still there. "I have it," she would whisper to herself. "I have it right here." We met the rest of them at Terminal B. The contrast was immediate and nauseating. My parents and Mallory looked like they were shooting a commercial for a luxury luggage brand. Gordon was wearing a linen blazer and loafers. Marianne had a silk scarf tied around her neck. Mallory was leaning against a stack of designer suitcases, typing furiously on her phone, looking bored before the vacation had even started. "There is the birthday girl," Gordon boomed when he saw us. He did not hug his mother. He just clapped a hand on her shoulder, heavy and patronizing. "Ready for the high life. Mom, we got a suite with a view of the ocean. You are going to love it." "I am ready." "Gordon," Evelyn said, smiling that tentative, fragile smile. "Thank you for doing this." "Family first," Gordon said, and he actually winked at me. It took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to scream. We moved toward the check-in counters. The airport was chaotic, a sea of rushing bodies and blaring announcements. The air smelled of burnt coffee and floor wax. We joined the priority line because, of course, Gordon Norris did not wait in standard lines. He stood with his chest puffed out, holding a sheaf of printed confirmations. When we reached the counter, the agent, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda, smiled mechanically. "Passports and IDs, please," she said. Gordon handed over the stack. He was chatting, making small talk about the weather, trying to charm her. Mallory was taking a selfie with the departure board in the background. I saw her caption, "Escape mode on," Brenda typed. She frowned. She typed again. The rhythmic click-clack of her keyboard was the only sound in my universe for 10 seconds. "I have Mr. and Mrs. Norris," Brenda said, her eyes flicking back to the screen. "I have Mallory Norris. I have Josie Norris and Raymond Hughes." She stopped. She looked at the stack of IDs in her hand, then back at the screen. "I am sorry," Brenda said. "I do not have a ticket for Evelyn Hart." The world seemed to stop spinning. The noise of the terminal faded into a dull roar. "That is impossible," Gordon said, his laugh sounding brittle. "Check again. It is a group booking. Norris party." "I am looking at the group booking, sir," Brenda said. Her voice lost its customer service lilt and became flat. "I have 5 tickets confirmed and paid for. There is no 6th ticket issued." Gordon turned to his mother. He did not look horrified. He did not look apologetic. He looked annoyed. He looked like a man who had been inconvenienced by a clumsy employee. "Mom," Gordon said, his voice taking on that scolding tone he used when she asked too many questions. "Did you send me your passport details when I told you I needed them to finalize the booking last week?" Evelyn stood frozen. Her hand went to her throat. "I gave them to you. Gordon, at the house. You took a picture of my license and my passport. You said it was all taken care of." "You must be confused," Gordon sighed. Shaking his head, he looked at the agent with a "what can you do" shrug. "She gets mixed up. She forgets things. Mom, I told you I needed the physical copy. You probably thought you gave it to me, but you left it on the counter. You do that a lot lately." It was a lie. It was such a blatant, violent lie that I felt the air leave my lungs. I had been there. I had seen him take the photo. I had heard him say, "Got it, Mom. You are all set." "I did not forget," Evelyn whispered. Her voice was so small it barely carried over the luggage belt. "I was so careful. I prepared everything." Well, obviously something happened, Marianne chimed in, smoothing her scarf. She wouldn't meet Evelyn's eyes. Gordon, can we just buy a ticket now? The flight is not full. Is it? It is fully booked, ma'am, Brenda said. She looked at Evelyn, and her expression softened into pity. That pity was worse than the rejection. It was the look you give a stray dog that you cannot take home. I can put her on standby for the evening flight, but it is overbooked by 3 seats already. Evening flight? Mallory groaned, finally looking up from her phone. We are not waiting around here for 6 hours. The limo is picking us up at the other end at 2. We cannot just leave her, I said. My voice sounded jagged to my own ears. Dad, fix this. You booked the trip. You said it was for her. Gordon looked at his watch. He looked at the long line of people behind us, growing impatient. He made a calculation. I saw it happen behind his eyes. He weighed his mother's dignity against his own convenience, and the scale didn't even tremble. Look, Gordon said, turning to Evelyn. Mom, maybe this is a sign. You were saying your hip was bothering you yesterday. A long flight. The heat, it might be too much. We will catch you on the next one, or we will do a big dinner when we get back. A really nice one. Evelyn stood there, clutching her purse. She looked at her son. She looked at the daughter-in-law who was checking her reflection in a compact mirror. She looked at the granddaughter who regarded her as a scheduling conflict. So, Evelyn said. Her voice was steady now, stripped of the tremor. I was never in the plan. Don't be dramatic, Gordon snapped. It is a clerical error. You forgot the passport info. It happens. I did not forget, she repeated, but she stepped back. She pulled her suitcase handle up with a click. You go. Have your vacation. Grandma. No, I stepped forward. I am not going. If you are not going, I am not going. Josie, stop it, Marianne hissed. Do not make a scene. You are ruining the vibe. The vibe? I stared at my mother. You just stranded an 80-year-old woman at the airport, and you are worried about the vibe. We are not stranding her, Gordon said. Raymond can drive her home. He is not really a resort person anyway. Right, Ray? You two take her back. Make sure she is settled. We will FaceTime you from the beach. He reached for his boarding pass. He was dismissing us. He was actually going to get on the plane. That was the moment the humiliation hit me. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a physical sensation, like being slapped in the face with a wet towel. People were staring. They saw a confused old woman being discarded by a wealthy family. They saw the cruelty of it, and I was standing there, part of the family name that was doing the discarding. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear up their passports. But then I felt a hand on my shoulder. Raymond. He did not shout. He did not cause a scene. He simply stepped between Gordon and Evelyn. He turned his back on my father completely, cutting him out of the circle. He looked at Evelyn. Mrs. Hart, Raymond said. His voice was gentle, the kind of tone you use to calm a frightened animal. I think the air conditioning in here is terrible, and I know a place about 20 minutes from here that makes the best pot roast in the state. Would you allow me to drive you there? Evelyn looked up at him. Her eyes were wet, but she did not let the tears fall. She nodded once. I would like that. Raymond? Let's go, Raymond said. He took her suitcase with one hand and took my hand with the other. He walked us away. We did not look back. I heard Gordon calling my name once, half-heartedly, but he did not follow. He had what he wanted. He had the money he hadn't spent on her ticket, and he had the freedom to enjoy his vacation without the burden of his mother's presence. The drive back to Cedar Ridge was the longest 45 minutes of my life. We did not go to the diner. Evelyn asked to go home. She sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the gray highway dividers rushing past. She did not speak. It wasn't the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of a woman who is rearranging the furniture in her mind. She was taking things down from the walls. She was boarding up windows. When we got to her house, I made tea. Raymond sat on the porch, giving us space. but staying close enough to be a sentry. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, still wearing her coat. She wrapped her hands around the mug, seeking warmth. "He told me to sign a paper last month," she said suddenly. I froze, the teaspoon midway to the saucer. "What paper?" "He brought it over with the groceries," Evelyn said. She was speaking to the steam rising from the cup. "He said it was an updated insurance form for the house. He said the rates were going up, and if I didn't sign it immediately, the coverage would lapse. He was in such a hurry. He kept looking at his watch." He said, "Mom, trust me. Just sign it. I read it for you. You know your eyes aren't good." "And you signed it?" I asked gently. "I signed it," she said. She looked up at me, and her expression was terrifyingly clear. "Because I didn't want him to think I was useless. I didn't want him to think I couldn't handle things. He makes me feel slow. He tells me I forget conversations we never had. He tells me I agreed to things I never heard of. And after a while, you start to believe him," I finished. "I thought I was losing my mind," Evelyn confessed. "I thought, maybe I did promise him the money. Maybe I did agree to pay for Mallory's venue. Maybe I am just a burden." She set the mug down. The china clattered against the wood. "But today," she said, "today, I had that passport. I put it on the counter. I watched him take the picture. And when he stood there in front of that woman and told me I forgot it, I knew." "You knew what?" "I knew he wasn't protecting me," Evelyn said. "I knew he was waiting for me to die." The words hung in the kitchen, heavy and suffocating. Waiting for me to die. It was the brutal, unvarnished truth. Gordon Norris viewed his mother not as a parent, but as a holding company with a decreasing life expectancy. Every dollar she spent on herself was a dollar he wouldn't inherit. Every year she lived was another year of maintenance costs. The trip wasn't a gift. It was a performance, and leaving her behind wasn't an accident. It was a saving strategy. I looked at my grandmother. I saw the shame in her posture. She felt stupid for trusting him. She felt humiliated for being left. But underneath the shame, I saw something else. I saw the ember of the woman who had raised 3 children while working in a textile mill. I saw the woman who had taught me to prune roses. You have to cut the dead wood so the new growth can survive. I reached across the table and took her hands. "He thinks he won today," I said. "He thinks he got away with it because we walked away." "He is my son," Evelyn said. But there was no warmth in the word. It was just a biological fact. "He is a predator," I said, "and he is eating you alive." I stood up. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, a different kind of cold than the one I had felt in the dining room weeks ago. That had been shock. This was resolution. "No more," I said. "No more keeping the peace. No more pretending he is a good man who makes mistakes. He used your dignity to buy a vacation. He used your trust to steal my wedding. He is done." I walked to the back door and opened it. Raymond stood up immediately, tossing his phone into his pocket. "We need the lawyer," I said to him. "Not next week. Now. Tonight if possible." Raymond looked at Evelyn through the screen door, then back at me. "I already texted Dana from the car. She can see us tomorrow morning at 8. "Good." I turned back to Evelyn. "Grandma, I need you to do something hard. I need you to admit that your son is a thief. Not just to me, to a judge." Evelyn stood up. She took off her hat, the new hat she had bought for the trip she never took, and placed it on the table. She smoothed her hair. "He left me at the counter," she said softly. "He looked right at me and left me." She looked at me, and the shame was gone, replaced by a cold, hard iron. "Call the lawyer. Josie, I am done being the forgotten luggage." I realized then that my father had made a fatal tactical error. He had assumed that stripping Evelyn of her dignity would make her weak. He didn't realize that dignity was the only thing keeping her polite. Now that he had taken it, there was nothing left to stop her from destroying him. The nice grandmother was gone, the matriarch was back, and she was ready to collect her debt. The transition from being a daughter to being a plaintiff does not happen in a single moment. It happens in the quiet hours between midnight and 3 in the morning. Illuminated by the blue light of a laptop screen, I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the website of the National Center on Elder Abuse. The terminology was sterile, but the definitions hit me like physical blows. Financial exploitation. The illegal or improper use of an elder's funds, property, or assets. Undue influence. The substitution of one person's will for the true desires of another. I read the warning signs: sudden changes in bank account practices, unexplained withdrawals, the inclusion of additional names on signature cards, the elder appearing fearful or submissive toward a caregiver. It was not a checklist. It was a biography of my grandmother's last 5 years. Raymond walked in from the bedroom. He did not ask what I was doing. He placed a fresh cup of coffee next to my hand and sat opposite me. He opened a notebook. "We stop reacting," Raymond said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who solved problems for a living. "We start building. If we go into a courtroom with feelings, your father will destroy us. He will charm the judge. He will play the devoted son, and he will paint you as the greedy, estranged daughter. We need to go in with math. Math does not have feelings." He turned the notebook around. He had drawn a grid. "We need 5 pillars," he explained. 1, the bank statements, which we have started. 2, the original power of attorney documents versus the new ones. 3, the history of transfers. 4, the beneficiary changes. And 5, the digital footprints. "Digital footprints?" I asked. "Signatures," Raymond said. "Timestamps, login locations. If your father is moving money online, he is leaving an IP address. If he is signing documents digitally, there is metadata." We met Dana Kessler 2 days later. Her office was in a glass building downtown, the kind of place that smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. Dana was a woman in her 50s, with hair cut sharp as a blade and eyes that looked like they could scan a contract through a lead envelope. She did not offer us tea. She offered us a seat and opened a file. "I have looked at the preliminary scans you sent," Dana said. She did not look at me or Raymond. She looked directly at Evelyn. "Mrs. Hart, I am going to ask you some questions. I am going to be blunt. I need you to be accurate." Evelyn nodded, clutching her purse. "I will try." "Do not try," Dana said. "Do?" She pulled out the photo of the durable power of attorney document I had found. "Did you sign this?" "I think so," Evelyn said, her voice wavering. "Gordon brought it over. He said it was for the insurance." Dana leaned forward. "Stop. Listen to my question. Did you know you were signing a power of attorney that gave your son the right to sell your house and empty your bank accounts?" "No," Evelyn whispered. "He said insurance." "Then you did not sign a power of attorney," Dana stated. "You signed a document under false pretenses. That is fraud. Who told you it was for insurance?" "Gordon." "Did you read it?" "He was rushing me," Evelyn said, shrinking back into the chair. "He said the agent was waiting outside. He said I read too slow." Dana made a note. "Isolation and time pressure. Classic tactics." She looked up. "Mrs. Hart, every time you say, 'I think I agreed,' or 'I might have forgotten,' I want you to ask yourself, who told you that you forgot? Is it your memory that is failing? Or is it the narrative someone else is feeding you?" It was a brutal hour. Dana stripped away the layers of family and help until all that was left was the raw mechanic of theft. And then we got to the wedding fund. Dana pulled up a transaction record. "Josie, you mentioned a $25,000 wedding fund. Gordon claimed this was his money he was generously gifting you. Correct?" "Yes." "And then he took it away to give to Mallory." "Yes." Dana slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an old document, yellowed at the edges, scanned into her system. "This is the opening record for the savings account ending in 409. It was opened in 1998. The initial deposit was $50,000. The source of funds was a life insurance payout from your grandfather's policy. I stared at the document. I saw my grandfather's signature. The account was titled Grandchildren's Education and Life Fund. Dana read, Gordon was listed as the custodian because you were minors, but that money was never his, it was yours, and Mallory's, legally. He holds it in trust. By threatening to take it away from you and give it to Mallory based on his personal preference, he violated his fiduciary duty. He is not the owner of that money. Josie, he is just the delivery boy, and he decided to steal the package. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. All those years of holding that money over my head. All those times he made me feel grateful for the scraps he was promising. It was never his to give. He had been playing God with my grandfather's ghost. We need to prove the forgery on the new power of attorney, Raymond said, cutting through my anger. The signature looks close. A layman would say it matches. I have a contact, Raymond continued. Looking at Dana, a firm called Arrowhead Forensic Auditing. They specialize in digital signature authentication and handwriting analysis. I want to send them the high-resolution scans. Dana nodded. Do it. If we can prove the signature on the control document is void, the whole house of cards falls down. But we need more. We need to link the withdrawals to his spending. We need to show that the money leaving Evelyn's account is paying for Gordon's life. That night, the detective work fell to me, and I found the evidence not in a bank vault, but on Instagram. My sister Mallory lived her life online. She documented every latte, every outfit, and every thought. I sat on my couch, my phone plugged into the charger, scrolling back 3 months. I had the spreadsheet Raymond had built open on my laptop. November 14th, withdrawal of $4,000 from Evelyn's savings, cash. I scrolled to November 14th on Mallory's feed. There was a photo of her and my mother holding champagne flutes. The caption read, Dress shopping with the best mom, put the deposit down on the dream gown, blessed Norris wedding. I checked the price of the designer she tagged. The deposit requirement was exactly $4,000. I kept going. December 2nd, withdrawal of $2,500. Label, emergency home repair. I checked Mallory's feed for December 2nd. A video of her showing off a new tiered cake stand and a tasting menu. Menu finalized. It is going to be expensive, but so worth it. The timestamps were damning. Every time a significant chunk of money left my grandmother's account. My sister posted about a major wedding expense within 24 hours. My father wasn't just stealing. He was acting as a direct pipeline. He was siphoning the life savings of the woman who raised him to pay for the vanity of the daughter he preferred. Raymond, I called out. My voice was shaking. Look at this. He came over and looked at the screen. He compared the dates. He didn't say a word. He just reached for his phone and took pictures of Mallory's posts. She is providing the confession, Raymond said. She thinks she is bragging. She does not realize she is timestamping the crime. But does she know, I asked? Does Mallory know where the money is coming from? She probably didn't ask, Raymond said. And in the eyes of the law, willful ignorance is not a defense, but Gordon knows exactly what he is doing. I started a new folder on my computer. I named it The Evidence. I began to record everything. I went back through my texts with my father. I found the messages where he claimed he was tight on cash and couldn't help Grandma with her heating bill. Dated 2 days before he withdrew $600 from her account for transportation. I saved the voicemails my mother had left me, guilt-tripping me about not appreciating the sacrifices they made. I listened to her voice, shrill and demanding, and compared it to the silence of my grandmother sitting in that airport terminal. I was not just gathering data, I was building a weapon. The next morning, we had a conference call with Dana. Raymond had received the preliminary report from Arrowhead Forensics. It is a digital manipulation, Raymond told the room, his voice coming through the speakerphone clear and sharp. The signature on the power of attorney wasn't signed with a pen, it was lifted. They took a high-resolution scan of a legitimate signature from an old deed, removed the background noise, and pasted it onto the new document, Arrowhead found pixelation artifacts around the loops of the letters that do not match the rest of the document's resolution. That is forgery, Dana said, the satisfaction evident in her tone. And it is clumsy forgery. That is a felony. It gets better, Raymond said. I ran a trace on the routing number for the service fee transfers. It is not a utility company. It is a Shell, LLC, registered in Delaware. The registered agent is a generic service, but the mailing address forwards to a P.O. box in Cedar Ridge. Let me guess, I said. My father has a key to that P.O. box. I am betting he does, Raymond said. We will need a subpoena to prove it, but I am 99% sure that money is going in a circle. He takes it out of her account to pay a vendor, and the vendor is just his own pocket. The picture was complete. It was grotesque, but it was complete. My father had built a machine designed to consume his mother. He had automated the cannibalism of her assets. We have enough to file, Dana said. We can file for an emergency injunction to freeze the accounts. We can petition for the removal of Gordon as the agent, and we can file a civil suit for the recovery of funds. Do it, Evelyn said. She was sitting beside me, listening. She looked tired, but her jaw was set. Evelyn, Dana said, her voice dropping, I need you to understand what happens next. When we file this, the sheriff will serve him papers. He will be locked out of the accounts. His credit cards might stop working if they are linked. He is going to come at you. He is going to come at you with everything he has. He will scream, I said. He will threaten. He will do more than that, Dana warned. She looked at me, and her eyes were dark. He will try to prove Evelyn is incompetent. He will say she is senile, that you are manipulating her. He will try to get a guardianship over her to silence her. He won't stop, Josie. He cannot stop, because if he stops, he goes to jail. And men like Gordon Norris will burn the whole world down before they trade a country club membership for a prison cell. Let him try, Raymond said. He thinks you will fold, Dana said to me. He thinks you are still the little girl who wants his approval. He thinks that if he yells loud enough, you will apologize and drop the case to save the family name. I thought about the airport. I thought about the empty seat where my grandmother should have been. I thought about the text message my father sent me that morning, hope you are cooling off. Let's discuss the wedding budget when I get back. He was still playing the game. He thought he still held the purse strings. He didn't realize we had cut the strings and were coming for the hand that held them. I do not want his approval, I said to Dana. I want his resignation. Then we file, Dana said. Prepare yourself. The quiet part is over. We left the office into the bright, harsh sunlight of the city. The city noise was loud sirens, traffic, construction, but it felt honest. It was better than the quiet lies of the suburbs. Are you ready? Raymond asked me, unlocking the car. No, I admitted. But I am doing it anyway. That is the definition of bravery, he said. As we drove away, I looked at my phone. Mallory had posted again, a picture of her and Gordon on the beach, holding colorful cocktails. Living our best lives, the caption read. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder. Enjoy the drink. Dad, I thought, it is the last one Grandma is ever going to pay for. The arrivals hall at Lakehurst International was a cavern of noise and fluorescent light, a place where people usually cried tears of joy or exhaustion. We were not there for either. We stood near the barrier separating the secure zone from the public waiting area. Forming a grim phalanx, I stood on the left, Raymond stood on the right, in the center, sitting on a hard plastic bench with her hands folded over her purse. Was Grandma Evelyn, and standing slightly ahead of us, like the tip of a spear, was Dana Kessler. We had been waiting for 40 minutes. The flight from the resort was delayed, which only added to the tension coiling in my stomach. I watched the automatic doors slide open and closed. Disgorging stream after stream of tanned, relaxed travelers, I felt like an imposter. I wasn't a traveler. I was a sniper waiting for the target to cross the line of sight. They have landed, Raymond said, checking his phone. They are at baggage claim 3. They should be coming through the doors in 10 minutes. I am ready, Evelyn said. She didn't look up. Her voice was quiet, but it had lost the quaver that had been there for the last 5 years. It was the voice of a woman who had already survived the crash and was just walking through the wreckage. Remember, Dana said, smoothing the lapel of her charcoal blazer. Let me speak first. Gordon is going to try to dominate the conversation. He is going to try to make this social. We do not let him. This is a legal interaction happening in a public space. 10 minutes later, I saw them. They looked like a parody of Success. Gordon was pushing a cart stacked high with matching silver luggage. He was wearing a white linen shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a tan that cost more than my car. Marianne walked beside him in a flowing sundress, looking refreshed and oblivious, and trailing behind them, tapping on her phone, was Mallory. She wore oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, radiating the specific arrogance of someone who believes the world is a movie set constructed for her benefit. They were laughing. That was the detail that made my hands curl into fists. They were laughing about something, maybe the in-flight meal, maybe a joke about the poor service at the hotel, completely unbothered by the fact that they had left the matriarch of their family sitting on a suitcase in this very building a week ago. Gordon saw us first. His smile didn't drop immediately. It froze. For a split second, he looked confused, as if he couldn't process why his mother and his estranged daughter were standing there with a stranger in a suit. He probably thought, in his delusional narcissism, that we were there to welcome them home. He probably thought we had come to apologize. He raised a hand to wave, but the gesture died halfway up. He saw the expression on Evelyn's face. He saw the hard, unblinking stare of Raymond. And he saw Dana. The cart slowed to a halt. Marianne bumped into him. "Gordon, why are you stopping?" she asked, adjusting her sunglasses. Then she looked up. "Oh, Josie." Mallory looked up from her phone. She pulled her sunglasses down her nose. "Seriously? You guys came to pick us up. That is actually kind of weirdly sweet, considering how dramatic you were being." Gordon didn't speak. He was looking at Dana. He knew what a lawyer looked like. He knew what that specific posture meant. "Welcome back," Dana said. Her voice cut through the ambient noise of the terminal like a razor wire. She didn't smile. She didn't extend a hand. "Who is this?" Gordon asked, his voice tight. He looked at me. "Josie, who is this?" "My name is Dana Kessler," she answered for me. "I am the attorney representing Mrs. Evelyn Hart." Gordon's face turned a shade of red that clashed violently with his tan. "Attorney. What the hell is this, Mom? You hired a lawyer." Evelyn stood up. She moved slowly, but she didn't wobble. She looked her son in the eye. "I did not hire her. Gordon, I accepted her help. There is a difference." "This is ridiculous," Gordon sputtered. Looking around to see if anyone was watching, he lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. "We just got off a plane. We are tired. And you greet us with a lawyer. This is a family matter. Josie, you are bringing a stranger into private business." "It ceased to be a private family matter when you forged a signature on a durable power of attorney document," Dana said. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. The words were heavy enough to drop the temperature by 20 degrees. Gordon flinched. It was a micro-reaction, a tightening of the jaw, a flicker of the eyelids, but it was there. "I have no idea what you are talking about," he said, puffing his chest out. "I manage my mother's finances because she is incapable of doing it herself. She gets confused. She forgets things. If I signed anything, it was under her verbal instruction. We have the forensic report. Mr. Norris," Dana said calmly. "We know the signature was lifted from a 1998 deed. We know about the shell company in Delaware. We know about the cash withdrawals every Friday. We know about the wedding fund." Marianne gasped. She looked at Gordon, her eyes wide. "Gordon, what are they talking about?" "They are talking nonsense," Gordon shouted. Losing his composure, People turned to look. He stepped closer, trying to use his physical size to intimidate us. "You are destroying this family. Josie, you are listening to this ambulance chaser, and you are tearing us apart over money. After everything I have done for you, I gave you a life. I gave you everything." "You gave my money to Mallory," Evelyn said. The sentence hung in the air. Gordon looked at his mother. "Mom, don't start. You don't understand the complexities of—" "I understand that I was left at this airport," Evelyn said. Her voice rose, just a little. "I understand that you told the ticket agent I forgot my passport when you knew you had never bought me a ticket. I understand that you needed the money for the suite more than you needed your mother there." "That was a mistake," Gordon yelled. "A booking error." "No," Evelyn said. "It was a choice. You chose to erase me, and now you are angry because I am writing myself back in—" "You are ungrateful," Gordon spat. "I took care of you. I handled the bills you couldn't read, and this is how you repay me by humiliating me in public by destroying the family." "The family destroyed me first," Evelyn replied. It was a simple sentence. 4 words, but they hit Gordon with the force of a physical blow. He opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. He looked at Marianne for support, but she was stepping back, distancing herself from the blast radius. Mallory, sensing her father was losing ground, decided to jump into the fray. She dropped her suitcase handle and marched up to Raymond. She needed a target she felt she could bully. And in her mind, Raymond was still the quiet, boring boyfriend who drove a sedan. "This is your fault, isn't it?" Mallory sneered, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "You put them up to this. Josie doesn't have the guts for this. This has your pathetic, jealous energy all over it." Raymond looked down at her finger. He didn't move. "You sit at our table, eat our food, and then you sneak around behind our backs," Mallory continued, her voice shrill. "Who do you think you are? You are nobody. You won't even tell us what you do for a living because you are ashamed of it." "What are you?" "Raymond. A filing clerk, a failed accountant. You are jealous because we have a life, and you have whatever this is." She waved her hand at us, dismissing our entire existence. "Answer me," she demanded. "Why are you hiding? What is it you actually do that is so secret?" Raymond sighed. It was a long, weary sound. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, Gordon looked terrified, as if Raymond might pull out a weapon. But Raymond only pulled out his phone. He unlocked it, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it around, just like he had at the dinner table. But this time, it wasn't a bank statement. It was his digital credentials. "I do not hide my job, Mallory," Raymond said. His voice was calm, projecting perfectly over the airport din. "I just don't talk about it with people who are likely to be the subject of my investigations." He held the screen up to Gordon's face. I saw Gordon's eyes scan the text. I saw him read the name of the firm. Vector Forensic Accounting Asset Recovery, and below that, Raymond's title, Senior Lead Investigator, High Net Worth Fraud Division. Gordon went pale. It wasn't the gray pallor of the dinner party. It was the white, bloodless look of a man who realizes he has walked into a cage with a tiger he thought was a house cat. "Vector," Gordon whispered. "You work for Vector." "I do," Raymond said, "and I specialize in tracing hidden assets through shell companies. Specifically, LLCs registered in Delaware that route funds to personal accounts disguised as service fees." Mallory looked between them, confused. "Dad, what is Vector? Is that a big deal?" Gordon didn't answer her. He couldn't. He knew what Vector was. Everyone in the financial world knew what Vector was. They were the sharks that ate the other sharks. They were the firm the government hired when they couldn't find the money. "You said you were in risk assessment," Gordon choked out. "I am," Raymond said. "I assess the risk of people like you thinking they are smarter than the banking system. And frankly, Gordon, your risk level is currently catastrophic." Raymond tapped the screen again. A new image appeared. It was a complex flowchart. "I spent the week while you were drinking Mai Tais mapping your entire financial structure," Raymond said casually. "I found the transfer to the wedding planner, I found the payments for the luxury car lease. I found the 5-figure transfer to cover your gambling debt in Atlantic City from last March. All of it funded by the Evelyn Hart Revocable Trust. He lowered the phone. I do exactly what you fear most, Raymond said to the stunned silence. I follow the money, and I found where it went. It went to you. Gordon looked at the cart of luggage. He looked at his wife, who was now covering her mouth with her hand. He looked at his daughter, who had lowered her pointing finger. He looked small. For all his height and his expensive linen, he looked incredibly small. This is entrapment, Gordon muttered, grasping for straws. You cannot use this. You obtained this illegally. Public records, court filings, and data from your mother's own authorized access, Dana interjected smoothly. It is all admissible, and it is all devastating. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. It wasn't a cream-colored wedding envelope. It was manila, thick and heavy. She held it out to Gordon. Mr. Norris, you are hereby served with a notice of mandatory mediation and a forensic audit demand, Dana said. We have also filed a temporary restraining order freezing your access to all accounts associated with Mrs. Evelyn Hart. Your cards won't work. Gordon, not for the cab ride home, not for dinner tonight. Gordon didn't take the envelope. Dana simply placed it on top of the stack of silver suitcases. It sat there, an ugly yellow stain on his perfect luggage. You have 72 hours to respond, Dana continued. If you do not agree to the mediation terms, or if you attempt to contact Mrs. Hart without legal counsel present, we will bypass civil court and take this directly to the district attorney's office. We are talking about elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. That is not a lawsuit. Gordon, that is prison time. Gordon stared at the envelope. His hands were shaking. Mom, he croaked. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes wet with panic. Mom, please, you are going to let them do this to your son over money. Evelyn looked at him. She adjusted her grip on her purse. It is not over money, Gordon, she said softly. It is over the ticket. You didn't buy the ticket. She turned to me. I am ready to go home now. Josie. Let's go, I said. We turned our backs on them. We walked away toward the exit doors, the automatic glass sliding open to welcome us into the cool air. Behind us, I heard Mallory ask, Daddy, what does he mean the cards won't work? I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I would see. I would see a family that had spent a lifetime building a pedestal, standing in the ruins of it, realizing too late that the foundation was made of people they thought they could crush. Raymond walked beside me, his stride matching mine. You okay? He asked quietly. I will be, I said. Did you see his face? I saw it, Raymond said. That was the face of a man who just realized the math doesn't work in his favor anymore. We walked out to the parking lot, leaving the Norris family to figure out how they were going to pay for a taxi without access to my grandmother's money. It was a small victory, petty perhaps, but as the automatic doors closed behind us, cutting off the sight of them, I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. The cold open was over. Now, the real story could begin. War in the 21st century does not start with a cannon blast. It starts with a notification on your phone screen at 6 a.m. I woke up to a vibrating buzz against my nightstand. The screen was lit up with alerts, but not the kind I wanted. They were not from the lawyer, and they were not from the court. They were from Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn. I opened the first one. It was a screenshot sent by an old friend from high school, accompanied by a message that simply read, "Are you okay?" Mallory is posting some crazy stuff. I clicked through to my sister's profile. Her account was public. Of course, it was a carefully curated gallery of beige aesthetics, latte art, and moments of manufactured joy. But the story she had posted 2 hours ago was different. It was a black screen with white text, the font stark and serious. It is so sad when the people you love let jealousy turn them toxic. The text read, "Some people cannot handle seeing others shine, So they try to burn the whole stage down, sending love and light to those who are hurting. Even the ones trying to hurt me. Family drama. High road toxic negativity. It was a masterpiece of vague booking. She did not name me. She did not name Evelyn. She did not mention the stolen money or the abandoned grandmother at the airport. She simply painted a picture of herself as the martyr and me as the bitter, jealous sister, who was trying to ruin her big moment. I scrolled to the next slide. It was a video of her crying. Just a single, perfect tear tracking down her cheek, with a caption, trying to stay positive for the wedding. But it is hard when you are being attacked by your own blood. Thank you to everyone for the support. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. It was not just the lie. It was the strategy. Mallory was rewriting the narrative before we even stepped into a courtroom. She was defining the victim, and in her version of the story, the victim was the girl who might lose her party, not the 80-year-old woman losing her life savings. "Don't look at it," Raymond said. He was standing in the doorway, buttoning his shirt. He had seen the phone in my hand. "She is spinning it," I said, my voice thick with sleep and anger. "She is making me look like I'm doing this out of spite." "She is doing what narcissists do when they are cornered," Raymond said. "They project. It does not matter what she posts. Josie, judges do not care about Instagram stories. They care about bank transfers." I tried to believe him. I tried to put the phone down and focus on the legal case, but the digital world bleeds into the real world in ways you cannot control. I arrived at Marrowline Creative Bureau at 9 o'clock. Usually, the office was a sanctuary for me, a place of quiet focus and creative problem-solving, but the moment I walked in, the atmosphere felt off. The receptionist, a girl named Sarah, who usually greeted me with a joke about the coffee machine, kept her head down. My creative director, a man named Marcus, who had mentored me for 3 years, called me into his office before I even took my coat off. "Close the door, Josie," Marcus said. He did not smile. I sat down. My stomach began to knot. "Is everything okay? Marcus, is this about the deadline for the tech campaign?" Marcus sighed and turned his monitor around. "We lost the Redwood account this morning." I blinked. "Redwood? But I just sent them the final proofs. They loved the concept. They signed off on the budget." "They did," Marcus said, "until they received an email last night, an anonymous tip sent to their ethics board and CC'd to our general inbox." He opened an email client. The subject line read, "Concern regarding financial integrity of lead designer." I leaned forward, reading the text. "To whom it may concern, it has come to my attention that Josephine Norris, who handles sensitive budget allocations for your project, is currently involved in a domestic legal dispute regarding the embezzlement of family funds and the exploitation of a vulnerable elder. While this is a personal matter, her stability and financial ethics are questionable at best. A company of your stature should be careful who you trust with your assets." The room spun. It was a precise, targeted missile. It used the truth, the legal dispute, the elder abuse, but twisted it to make me the perpetrator, or at least the unstable element. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaking, "this is a lie. I mean, there is a dispute, but I am the plaintiff. I am the one protecting my grandmother. My father is the one who took the money." "I believe you, Josie," Marcus said, and I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "But Redwood is a conservative client. They do not do drama. They do not do questionable ethics. They pulled the contract effective immediately. They said they do not want the noise." He paused, tapping a pen on his desk. "I have to take you off the active client roster. Josie, just until this blows over, I cannot risk another email like this going to a new prospect." I walked out of that office feeling like I had been hollowed out. They had not just stolen my grandmother's money. They were coming for my livelihood. They knew that without my job, I could not afford the lawyer. They knew that if they broke me financially, I would have to drop the case. I drove home at noon, my box of personal items on the passenger seat. I felt stripped. I felt naked. Raymond was working from home. He saw my face, saw the box, and he knew. Who? He asked. His voice was low. Dangerous. Anonymous email to my biggest client, I said, dropping the box on the floor. Got me suspended. They implied I was an embezzler. Raymond opened his laptop. Give me the email header. Marcus forwarded it to you. Yes. I watched him work. He did not type frantically like they do in movies. He moved with a slow, methodical precision. He opened terminal windows. He ran trace routes. He peeled back the layers of digital masking that the sender thought would protect them. It took him 20 minutes. It was sent from a Proton Mail account, Raymond said. Encrypted, supposedly untraceable. So we can't prove it. Proton Mail is secure, Raymond agreed. But the user made a mistake. They accessed the account to send the email from a device that had previously cached a location token for a different service on the same browser session. A sloppy VPN disconnect. He turned the screen to me. The IP address originates from a residential node in Cedar Ridge, specifically. A node assigned to the subscriber Gordon Norris. My father sent it. No, Raymond said. Look at the device ID fingerprint. It is an iPhone 15 Pro Max. Your father uses an Android. He has been complaining about the interface for years. Who has the new iPhone? Mallory, I whispered. Of course, it was Mallory. My father might be the thief, but Mallory was the assassin. She was the one who understood how to weaponize reputation. She didn't care about the legal facts. She cared about the court of public opinion. And she was willing to burn my career to the ground to save her wedding budget. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Gordon. I stared at it. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated nerve. Answer it, Raymond said. Put it on speaker. Record it. I swiped green. Hello? Josie. Gordon's voice came through the speaker. It was different than it had been at the airport. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't angry. It was soft. It was the voice he used when I was 6 years old and had scraped my knee. It was the voice of a father. Josie, honey, he said. I heard about what happened at work. Marcus called me. We play golf together sometimes. I am so sorry. I felt a chill go down my spine. He knew. Of course he knew. Did you call him, Dad? I asked. Did you tell him to fire me? No, God, no, Gordon said, sounding wounded. I defended you. I told him it was all a misunderstanding, but you know how these corporate types are. They are risk-averse. He paused, letting the silence hang there, letting the weight of my unemployment settle on my shoulders. This has gone too far. Josie, he said. Lawyers, subpoenas, losing your job. It is destroying everyone. And for what? For a misunderstanding about accounting. It is not a misunderstanding, I said. It is theft. It is family, Gordon corrected gently. Look, I have been thinking. I do not want you to struggle. I know things are tight for you and Raymond. I can make this right. I can transfer $10,000 to you today, a gift, to help you get by while you look for a new job. We can forget about the court date. We can sit down like civilized people and handle Mom's care internally. $10,000. He was offering me $10,000 to shut up. He was offering me a fraction of what he had stolen, using money that was probably also stolen, to buy my silence. You want to settle? I asked. I want peace, Gordon said. I want my daughter back. I want Mom to be comfortable without strangers digging through her private life. Dana Kessler, she is a shark. Josie, she will drain the estate in legal fees. By the time this is over, there will be nothing left for anyone. Take the $10,000. Let's end this. For a second, just a split second, I felt the temptation, not for the money, but for the relief, to stop fighting, to stop the emails, the shame, the fear, to go back to being the invisible daughter. Then I looked at Raymond. He was watching me, his face impassive, trusting me to make the choice, and I thought about Evelyn. I thought about her sitting in that kitchen, signing papers she couldn't read because she didn't want to be a burden. No, I said. Josie, be reasonable. Gordon's voice hardened slightly. You are unemployed. You have no resources. You cannot win this. I am not taking your money. Dad, I said. Because it is not your money, and I am not dropping the case. In fact, I am adding a new exhibit. I am adding the email Mallory sent to my boss. We traced the IP, Dad. We know it came from her phone. There was a silence on the other end. A sharp intake of breath. You are making a mistake, Gordon said. The fatherly mask dropped completely. You are playing a game you do not understand. If you proceed with this, Josie, you are out. Permanently. No inheritance, no family, nothing. You will be dead to us. I was dead to you the moment you left Grandma at the airport, I said. I was just too stupid to realize it. I hung up. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He tried to buy me off. He is scared, Raymond said. He knows the forensic audit is coming. He knows what we are going to find. We need to tell Grandma, I said. She needs to know they are attacking me now. We went to Evelyn's house. She was in the garden, despite the cold. She was aggressively pruning a rosebush, cutting away thick, dead branches with a pair of heavy shears. When I told her about the job and about Mallory's post, she didn't cry. She didn't look frail. She looked at the shears in her hand. They think they can starve us out, Evelyn said. They think because I am old and you are young, we will break. Dana says the next step is nasty, I warned her. She says they will file a motion claiming you are incompetent. They will say you have dementia. They will say I am manipulating a confused old woman to get her money. They will try to invalidate your testimony. Evelyn snapped a branch in half. The sound was sharp, like a bone breaking. Let them try, she said. I want to testify. I do not want a deposition. I want to stand in front of a judge. I want to look Gordon in the eye when I say it. It will be hard. Grandma, they will ask you humiliating questions. They will ask you what year it is, who the president is, what you had for breakfast. I know who the president is, Evelyn said, and I know who my son is. He is a thief. I do not want to be saved by silence. Josie, I spent my whole life being quiet to keep the peace. Look where it got me. Left at a check-in counter. She looked at me, her eyes fierce. We fight. If they want to say I'm crazy, let them say it to my face. That evening, we met with Dana again to prepare the affidavit. The atmosphere was grim. My firing had raised the stakes. It was no longer a civil dispute. It was a war of attrition. We have the bank records, Dana said, pacing the room. We have the forgery. We have the airport incident, but Gordon is going to claim the money was a loan. He is going to produce witnesses who say Evelyn verbally agreed to everything. It will be he said, she said. We need a smoking gun, I said. We need something that proves intent, something that proves he didn't just borrow the money, but that he had to take it. Raymond, who had been silent in the corner, typing on his laptop, suddenly stopped. I found it, he said. We all turned. Found what? Dana asked. The motive, Raymond said. I have been digging into the vendor list for Mallory's wedding. I was trying to figure out why the costs were so inflated, why a florist costs $15,000, why a venue deposit is $20,000. He turned the laptop around. On the screen was a scanned copy of a contract, but it wasn't a wedding contract. It was a loan agreement. The wedding planner isn't a wedding planner, Raymond said. The company Platinum Events is a front. It is registered to a man named Silas Vane. Who is Silas Vane? I asked. He is a private lender, Dana said, her face going pale. A loan shark. He operates on the fringes of the Atlantic City casino circuit. He lends to high rollers who have maxed out their credit lines. Gordon didn't just steal the money to pay for a party, Raymond said, his voice cold. He owes Vane nearly $200,000. The wedding payments aren't buying flowers. Josie. They are interest payments. He is laundering the repayment of a gambling debt through his daughter's wedding budget. Oh my God, I whispered. Does Mallory know? I don't think so, Raymond said. I think she thinks she is getting a platinum wedding. She doesn't realize her venue deposit actually just kept her father's kneecaps intact. Raymond clicked a key. But here's the kicker. I found the collateral agreement to secure the loan. Gordon put up an asset he guaranteed he had control over. He zoomed in on the signature line. He pledged the house, Raymond said. He pledged Evelyn's house. If he misses the next payment, which is due in 3 days, Vane doesn't just come for Gordon. He comes for the deed to your grandmother's home. The room went silent. The scope of the betrayal had just expanded from theft to total annihilation. Gordon hadn't just spent her savings. He had bet the roof over her head on a losing hand, and he was willing to destroy my career, gaslight his mother, and smear his daughter just to keep the wheel spinning for 1 more week. He is desperate, Dana said, grabbing her phone. And desperate men are dangerous. We need to file the emergency injunction tonight. If Vane tries to foreclose on a fraudulent pledge, we have a war on 2 fronts. I looked at the screen. At my father's signature next to the name of a loan shark, I finally understood why he had looked so terrified at the dinner table. He wasn't afraid of being caught by his family. He was afraid of being found by the man he owed. Let's go, I said. Burn him down. The days leading up to the mandatory mediation were not filled with screaming matches. They were filled with paper. Stacks of it. Boxes of it. The war for my grandmother's dignity was currently being fought in a conference room that smelled of toner and stale coffee, where Dana Kessler was turning my family's history into a timeline of forensic evidence. We had created a war wall. On one side, we had the timeline of Evelyn's life, her doctor's appointments, her gardening club meetings, and the days she was physically present in her home. On the other side, in red marker, we had the timeline of Gordon Norris's theft. Look at the pattern, Dana said, tapping a ruler against the whiteboard. It is textbook. It is called smurfing in the banking world, structuring transactions to avoid federal reporting limits. Every Friday, he pulls out exactly $450. Why? Because 500 triggers a different internal review at the credit union. He stayed just under the radar. He thought he was being clever, Raymond said from the corner. He was typing on his laptop, his face illuminated by the blue glow. But he was just being predictable. We were preparing for the discovery exchange, the moment where we had to show our cards to the opposing counsel. Gordon had hired a man named Arthur Vance, a lawyer who specialized in making problems go away for rich men who didn't want to admit they were wrong. Vance had filed a preemptive defense statement that morning. I read it, and I felt the bile rise in my throat. It was a narrative of pure fiction. In Gordon's version of reality, Evelyn was a confused, deteriorating woman who required constant financial supervision. The statement claimed that every withdrawal was made with her verbal consent, and that the money was used for lifestyle maintenance and anticipated future medical needs. But the worst part was the paragraph about me. The plaintiff, Josephine Norris, has a history of financial instability and estrangement from the family core. Her sudden interest in Mrs. Hart's finances coincides with her own unemployment and lack of wedding funds. We assert that this action is a retaliatory attempt to extort money from her father due to jealousy over her sister's upcoming nuptials. He is calling me an extortionist, I said, throwing the document on the table. He steals $200,000, and I am the extortionist. It is a standard defense, Dana said, not looking up from her files. Attack the credibility of the whistleblower. He wants to make it look like a family squabble, so the judge sends us to therapy instead of sending him to jail. But we have something better than stories. We have IP addresses. Dana pulled up a new exhibit. On October 12th, the day the power of attorney was allegedly signed digitally, Evelyn was at a cardiologist appointment. We have the sign-in sheet from the clinic. She was there from 10 in the morning until noon. She pointed to a timestamp on the screen. The digital signature on the document was created at 10:45 in the morning, and thanks to Raymond's trace, we know exactly where it was signed. It wasn't signed on a tablet in a doctor's waiting room. It was signed from a desktop computer hardwired to the server at Gordon's insurance firm. He signed it from his desk while she was getting an EKG, I said. Exactly. Dana said. He didn't just forge it. He was too lazy to even leave his office to do it. That destroys his verbal consent argument. You cannot verbally consent to a digital signature that happens 5 miles away on a computer you do not know how to use. The next day, we met for the formal discovery conference. It wasn't the mediation yet that was scheduled for the following week. This was the meeting where the lawyers exchanged the hard evidence to see if a settlement could be reached before things got ugly. Gordon was there. He sat at the long mahogany table, looking thinner than I had ever seen him. His tan had faded into a sallow yellow. He wouldn't look at me. He kept whispering to Arthur Vance, his hands moving agitatedly. Mallory was there too. She sat next to him, dressed in a muted gray suit that looked like a costume she was wearing for a play about serious people. She looked annoyed, checking her watch, clearly feeling that this was a waste of her valuable wedding planning time. Evelyn sat beside me. She wore her best Sunday coat. She sat with her spine straight, her hands folded. She was the only person in the room who looked entirely at peace, because she was the only one with nothing to hide. "Let's make this quick," Vance said, opening his briefcase. "My client maintains that all funds were used appropriately. However, to spare his mother the stress of a trial, he is willing to return the $25,000 to the trust and pay a small stipend for Josie's legal fees. We consider this a generous offer." Dana didn't blink. She slid a thick binder across the table. "We are not here for $25,000. Arthur," Dana said. "We are here for the house." Gordon's head snapped up. "The house? What are you talking about?" "We know about the loan, Gordon," Raymond said. He hadn't spoken until now. He was sitting at the end of the table, his hands resting on a closed folder. When he spoke, the air in the room seemed to get heavier. "What loan?" Mallory asked, looking at her father. "Dad, what is he talking about?" "Quiet, Mallory," Gordon hissed. "No, I think she should hear this," Raymond said. He opened the folder. He took out a single sheet of paper, the copy of the contract with Silas Vane. "Your father didn't just take the money to pay for your wedding, Mallory," Raymond said, sliding the paper toward her. "He took it to service a debt, a massive debt, $215,000 owed to a private lending entity known as Platinum Ventures, operated by a man named Silas Vane." Mallory picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon. "I don't understand. Platinum Ventures. That is the parent company of my wedding venue. I wrote the check to them for the deposit." "You wrote a check to a loan shark," Raymond corrected. "The venue is a front. You are not paying for a ballroom. Mallory, you are paying the interest on your father's gambling losses and a failed land deal in Florida that went bust 6 months ago." Mallory went pale. She turned to Gordon. "Dad, is that true? Is my wedding a debt payment?" Gordon slammed his hand on the table. "This is preposterous. That is a private business arrangement. It has nothing to do with the trust." "It has everything to do with the trust," Dana interjected, her voice sharp. "Because you put up collateral." She flipped the page in the binder. There it was, the deed to Evelyn's house, attached to the loan agreement as security. "You pledged your mother's home," Dana said. "The home she has lived in for 40 years. You signed a document giving a loan shark the right to foreclose on her property if you missed 3 payments. And guess what? Gordon, you missed 2. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a family myth disintegrating. Mallory stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked at the document, then at her father. The realization was washing over her face, the horror not that she was losing money, but that she had been used. She wasn't the princess. She was the mule. "You told me the budget was strict because we were investing," Mallory whispered. "You told me the money was tight because of the market. But you were broke. You were broke and you let me plan a 6-figure wedding to pay off your bookie." "It wasn't a bookie," Gordon shouted, desperate now. "It was a leverage deal. It was supposed to pay out 10-1. I did it for us. I did it to secure the legacy." "You bet Grandma's house," Mallory said, her voice rising to a shriek. "You bet the house." "Sit down, Mallory," Vance warned. trying to regain control. No. Mallory turned on him. Then she looked at me. For the first time in her life, she didn't look at me with pity or contempt. She looked at me with terror. Josie, did you know? Did you know he pledged the house? We found out yesterday, I said calmly. That is why we are here, to stop him from losing it. Gordon stood up, his face purple. You hacked my files. You have no right to this. This is inadmissible. Actually, Raymond said, leaning back. It is public record if you know where to look. Liens are public. Gordon. Silas Vane filed a lien on the property last week when you missed the second payment. Raymond looked at Gordon, and his eyes were cold and hard. And here is the reality. Gordon, Raymond said, we are not just going to civil court. If you do not agree to our terms, full restitution, immediate removal from the trust, and a confession of judgment, I am going to hand this file to the district attorney, and I'm going to hand a copy to Silas Vane's competitors. Gordon froze. You are drowning, Raymond said softly, and we are the only ones offering you a life raft. The raft is expensive. Gordon, it costs you everything you have left, but the alternative is prison, or whatever Mr. Vane does to people who default. Gordon slumped back into his chair. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had been running a race for years and just realized he was running on a treadmill. Evelyn, who had been silent, cleared her throat. Gordon, she said. He looked at her. He looked like a frightened child. I do not care about the money, Evelyn said. Her voice was steady, but there was a deep, resonating sadness in it. I can live on a pension. I can live in a smaller house. She leaned forward. But what I cannot forgive, she said, is that you looked at me and you didn't see your mother. You saw a savings account. You saw collateral. And when we got to that airport, she paused, and the room seemed to hold its breath. When we got to that airport, and that woman said there was no ticket, Evelyn continued. I looked at your face, and I saw that you were relieved. You were relieved you didn't have to spend the week pretending to care about me. Mom, no, Gordon whispered. Yes, Evelyn said. That hurts more than the house. Gordon, being your spare change hurts more than being broke. She stood up. I am done talking. Dana, handle the rest. We walked out of the conference room. We left them there, Gordon with his head in his hands, Mallory staring at the loan document like it was a poisonous snake, and the expensive lawyer realizing he wasn't going to get paid. I felt a strange hollowness. We were winning. The evidence was overwhelming, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an amputation. We were cutting off the rot, but we were losing a part of ourselves in the process. That night, the eve of the final mediation, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the city lights. My phone buzzed on the table. I hesitated to look. I expected another attack from Mallory, another threat from Gordon. But it wasn't. It was a text from my mother, Marianne. I hadn't heard from her since the airport. She had gone silent, hiding behind Gordon's bluster, playing the role of the obedient wife who didn't know about finances. I opened the message. I didn't know. It read, I knew things were tight. I knew he borrowed from the trust. But I didn't know about the house. I didn't know about the loan shark. Josie, I am so scared. Everything is gone. Isn't it? I looked at the words. Everything is gone. She wasn't talking about the money. She was talking about the illusion of the perfect Norris family, the country club membership, the status. It had all been built on a foundation of theft, and now the ground was giving way. I typed back a single sentence. The truth is expensive, Mom, but it is the only thing we have left. I put the phone down. She is cracking, Raymond said from the doorway. He handed me a glass of wine. She is realizing the ship is sinking, I said, and she is trying to figure out if she can swim to our lifeboat. Do we let her in? Raymond asked. I thought about it. I thought about how she had sat there at the dinner table while Gordon gave my wedding fund away. I thought about how she had smoothed her scarf at the airport while Evelyn stood crying. No, I said. Not yet. She has to swim on her own for a while. She has to feel the water. Tomorrow was the end. Tomorrow we would walk into that mediation room and strip my father of his power. We would take back the house, the money, and the name. But tonight, I mourned. I mourned the family I never really had, the father I wanted, and the sister who might have been my friend if she hadn't been raised to view me as competition. "You ready for the kill shot?" Raymond asked. "It is not a kill shot," I said, standing up. "It is a mercy killing. We are putting the lie out of its misery." The mediation room was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown. A sterile environment designed to strip emotion out of conflict. There was no judge. There was no jury box. There was just a long, oval table made of polished oak that reflected the fluorescent lights, and a mediator named Mr. Sterling who looked like he had not smiled since the mid-90s. The silence in the room was heavier than any scream. On one side sat my family, Gordon, Marianne, and Mallory. They looked like a tableau of a family in varying stages of decay. Gordon was trying to maintain his posture, sitting upright, adjusting his cufflinks. Marianne was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring round and round. Mallory was pale, her eyes darting around the room, no longer looking at her phone. On the other side sat us, me, Raymond, Evelyn, and Dana Kessler, who had arranged her files with the precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. "We are here to resolve the matter of the Hart estate and the alleged misappropriation of funds," Mr. Sterling said. His voice was dry. "Mr. Norris, your counsel has indicated a desire to settle to avoid criminal referral." Gordon cleared his throat. He leaned forward, putting on the mask he wore for clients. The reasonable man, the patriarch. "Look," Gordon said, his voice smooth but slightly too loud for the room. "I want to be clear. Everything I did for this family. Being the head of a household is a burden. You make hard choices. I moved funds around to maximize liquidity. I borrowed against assets to secure better leverage. It was all with the intention of paying it back with interest. It was an investment strategy, not a crime." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to buy the lie one last time. "I love my mother," Gordon continued. "I would never harm her. The airport incident that was a misunderstanding, a logistical error. I have been painted as a villain here, but I'm just a son trying to keep the ship afloat." Dana did not look up from her legal pad. "Mr. Sterling, please ask the defendant to stop characterizing embezzlement as maximization of liquidity. We are not here for a philosophy debate. We are here for math." She slid a document across the table. "November 3rd, Dana read, withdrawal of $600, label, transportation." "Gordon, was your mother going to the moon?" "It was for a car service," Gordon mumbled. "Evelyn," Dana said, turning to my grandmother, "did you take a car service on November 3rd? "No," Evelyn said. Her voice was clear. She did not look at Gordon. She looked at the mediator. "I was home. I was knitting a scarf. I have not been in a car service in 10 years. Gordon drives me to church, or he used to." "November 10th, Dana continued. Relentless. Transfer of $4,000 to Platinum Ventures. Gordon claimed this was for home repairs. "Gordon, can you produce a contractor invoice?" Gordon shifted in his seat. "I lost the receipt. It was a cash job. It was a deposit for a chocolate fountain and a champagne wall." Mallory suddenly spoke up. The room froze. We all turned to Mallory. She was looking at her father with a mixture of horror and disgust. The reality of the loan shark contract Raymond had exposed the day before had finally sunk in. She realized her dream wedding was not a gift. It was a noose. "I saw the invoice, Dad," Mallory said, her voice shaking. "I saw the date. You paid the vendor the day after you took the money from Grandma. You told me you got a bonus. You lied." "Mallory, not now," Gordon hissed. "No, right now," Mallory shouted. "You let me brag about it. You let me post it online. You let me look like a princess while you were stealing from Grandma to pay a loan shark." Do you know what people are saying about me now? Do you know what this does to my brand? It was selfish. Yes, Mallory was crying for her reputation, not for Evelyn's savings, but it was the crack in the dam we needed. I did it for you, Gordon shouted back, slamming his hand on the table. You wanted the fairy tale. You wanted the flowers and the venue I was trying to give you what you wanted. By betting my house, Evelyn asked. The shout died in Gordon's throat. Evelyn stood up. She did not need help. She placed her hands flat on the table. You say you did it for family, Evelyn said. But Gordon, look at us. Josie is sitting with a lawyer. Mallory is crying about a chocolate fountain. And I am standing here wondering how I raised a son who could leave me standing at an airport terminal and tell the ticket agent I was senile. Mom, I didn't say you were senile, Gordon whimpered. You said I was confused, Evelyn corrected. You gaslighted me. You told me I forgot conversations we never had. You told me I signed papers I never saw. You made me doubt my own mind so you could rob me without a fight. That is not love. Gordon, that is cruelty. She sat down. I am not confused today, and I am not forgetting anything. Mr. Sterling looked at Gordon. The mediator's face was grim. Mr. Norris, the plaintiff has presented a forensic accounting trail that links 24 separate withdrawals directly to your personal debts and your daughter's wedding expenses. They also have a forensic report indicating digital signature manipulation on the power of attorney. That is circumstantial, Gordon's lawyer tried to interject. But his heart wasn't in it. It is not circumstantial, Raymond said. Raymond opened his laptop. He turned it so Gordon could see. This is the metadata from the PDF of the power of attorney, Raymond said. It shows the document was created, edited, and signed within a 3-minute window on a computer with the IP address registered to your private office. At that exact time, your mother's cell phone pings placed her 5 miles away at the Lakehurst Medical Center. Raymond tapped a key. And this, he continued, is the email thread between you and Silas Vane. We subpoenaed his records this morning. He keeps excellent archives for a loan shark. Raymond read from the screen. Silas, give me 2 more weeks. I am moving the funds from the old lady's trust. Just do not file the lien. I will get you the deed if I have to. Gordon turned white. He looked like a ghost. The undeniable proof of his intent, the premeditation, was staring him in the face. You emailed him, Marianne whispered. She spoke for the first time. She looked at her husband with wide, terrified eyes. You called her the old lady Gordon. She is your mother. Marianne, please, Gordon begged. I was under pressure. I knew you were borrowing, Marianne said, tears streaming down her face. I knew you were taking some off the top. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself you would put it back, but you were going to give him the house. You were going to let him throw her on the street. I had a plan, Gordon insisted. The Florida deal was going to close. There is no Florida deal, Raymond said coldly. We checked that too. You were scammed. Gordon, you bought swampland from a shell company that dissolved 3 months ago. You have been digging a hole to pay for a hole. The room fell silent again. The truth was laid bare on the table like a dissected corpse. There was no more family. There were just victims and a predator who had run out of prey. Here is the offer, Dana said. She pushed a final document across the table. 1 full restitution of the $215,000, to be paid via the liquidation of your personal assets, including your car and your share of the vacation home. 2 immediate resignation as trustee and power of attorney. 3 a permanent restraining order preventing you from accessing any of Evelyn Hart's financial or medical records. 4 you surrender the original deed to the house to us immediately, and we will handle the lien release with Mr. Vane. And if I refuse, Gordon asked weakly, then Raymond walks this file to the district attorney's office across the street, Dana said, and you leave this building in handcuffs. Gordon looked at the paper. He looked at his wife, who had turned her chair away from him. He looked at Mallory, who was frantically texting, likely canceling her vendors. He picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed. It was not the bold, arrogant signature he used on his checks. It was a scratch, a surrender. When we walked out of the building an hour later, the sun was setting. The city was bathed in a golden light that felt clean. Gordon did not walk out with us. He stayed behind with his lawyer, trying to figure out how to sell a luxury SUV to pay back his mother. Marianne and Mallory had left separately, slipping out a side door to avoid looking at us. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk. She took a deep breath of the cool air. "It is done," she said. "It is done." I agreed. "I need to make a new will," Evelyn said matter-of-factly. "Tomorrow, I want to make sure that if anything happens to me, there is no confusion, no verbal agreements. Everything goes to the people who actually showed up." She looked at Raymond. "You are a good man. Raymond Hughes, you saved my house." "You saved yourself, Evelyn," Raymond said, smiling. "I just did the math." 6 months later, I got married. It was not a production. There was no champagne wall. There were no influencers. It was in Evelyn's backyard, which was blooming with late summer roses. We had a food truck that served tacos. We had string lights hung between the old oak trees. My father was not there. He was currently living in a rented apartment on the other side of town, working to pay off the restitution plan under the watchful eye of a court-appointed monitor. Marianne called me once, crying, saying she missed us, but I told her that trust takes longer to rebuild than a bank account. Mallory had postponed her wedding indefinitely and was trying to rebrand herself as a wellness coach, pretending the last year never happened, but I did not care about them. I stood under the arbor, holding Raymond's hands. He looked handsome in his off-the-rack suit. He looked solid. "Do you take this man?" the officiant asked. "I do," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I was taking the man who had stood up when everyone else sat down, the man who had used his quiet power to protect the vulnerable. During the reception, I watched Evelyn. She was sitting at a table with Dana, laughing, eating a taco with a fork. She looked happy. She looked safe. I realized then that the revenge I had sought was not about hurting my father. It was not about making Mallory cry. It was about this. It was about stripping them of the power to define us. For years, they had made me feel small. They had made Evelyn feel useless. They had used our silence as a currency, but we had taken that currency away. We had bankrupted their authority. I walked over to the edge of the garden, looking at the house that was safe now, the deed locked away in a safe deposit box that only Evelyn and I could access. The air smelled of roses and grilled corn. It smelled like freedom. I had lost a family. Yes, but I had found the people who actually mattered. And as I looked back at Raymond, who was lifting a glass to toast my grandmother, I knew that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. The best revenge is not burning their house down. It is locking them out of yours and living a beautiful life that they can only watch from the street. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Juliet Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy subway in New York, a quiet room in London, or somewhere else entirely? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that the truth always wins. See you in the next episode.